Will the EU force its new migration pact on its member states? The EU's migration policy is undergoing a substantial overhaul. Brussels has proposed a new pact on migration and asylum. The aim is to straighten out long-lasting disagreements among the 27 member states and to ensure solidarity. But on social media, some fear that the new rules will be imposed on the countries. Let's check if that's the case. Migration is a so-called shared competence. This means that the EU and the member states both have powers in this area and can make laws. The EU is about to adopt new rules, which were recently given green light by the European Parliament. The ball is now in the court of the national governments. In June 2023, the migration ministers will meet to try to agree on a common position on these texts. They will vote by qualified majority. This means that 15 out of 27 member states, representing at least 65% of the total EU population, must approve the proposal. So technically, the agreement of all countries is not necessary for this reform to pass. But in reality, it's very rare that the other ministers push through a law if some states strongly disagree. They usually try to reach a compromise. Even when this happens, it's important to remember that qualified majority voting is fully in accordance with the EU treaties, and these fundamental principles have been ratified by all the national parliaments. The new migration package consists of 5 key pieces of legislation, known as regulations. Regulations enter into force immediately, and all countries are subject to the same rules. In this case, the member states can't play solo. But for all migration matters that don't fall under the EU's competence, such as integration, they can still pass their own laws. But what if a country would decide to go its own way, despite the regulations being adopted? Then a formal dialogue will be opened with the European Commission. If it still fails, Brussels will issue a formal request for the country to comply. If the country still doesn't collaborate, the European Court of Justice can impose fines on the country. In some cases, the European Commission can also withhold funding, but that's very rare. To conclude, yes, the other EU countries could technically override those who are against this migration pact. This is because the regulations are voted by qualified majority in the Council of Ministers. We need to keep in mind, though, that if one country strongly opposes a regulation, the original proposal is unlikely to be adopted. Instead, EU countries usually try to reach compromises.